All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to be talking about discrimination, but not just in one place, in two.
Exactly. We're diving into the film The Color of Darkness, and the academic chapter we're looking at unpacks how the film explores uh, this difficult issue of discrimination, both in India and within the Indian diaspora in Australia.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. And what really caught my eye is that the film's director, what's his name, Girish Makwana, he's had quite a journey himself.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just some, director making a film. Makwana is a really successful music director.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is he's also a Dalit and a person with a disability. So the chapter calls this double discrimination.
Double discrimination, huh? So,
Hmm.
like facing prejudice on two fronts, it's got to be tough, constantly being denied opportunities, treated differently just because of who you are.
Yeah, and the chapter argues that these experiences heavily influence the film's themes. It's not just additive, like 1
Yeah.
plus 1 equals 2. It creates a whole new dimension of exclusion.
Makes sense. So, how does this all play out in the film? The opening scene, from what I read, is pretty intense.
Yeah, it's pretty jarring. It starts with this group of Dalits, just singing bhajans, like religious songs,
Yeah.
in their village, and then bam, they're attacked.
Wow, just like that. The chapter mentions that this might be shocking for some viewers, but it's sadly a reality for many Dalits in India.
Right, and it sets the stage for the film's exploration of prejudice. This sudden violence, it shows how vulnerable Dalits are and that threat of caste-based violence that's always looming.
So it's like the film is throwing us right into the heart of the issue, no holding back.
Exactly. And then, almost like a mirror image, the film shifts to Australia. We see an Indian student, Jaideep Rajput, attacked on a metro by a group of white youths.
So, from a village in India to a metro in Australia, two very different settings, but connected by this thread of violence and prejudice.
Yeah, and it shows that this isn't just an India problem. Discrimination can transcend borders and manifest in different forms.
Right, the faces might change, the context might be different, but the underlying intent to dehumanize, to other someone, it's the same. So, how does the film delve into this? Who are the key players?
Well, we're introduced to Maria Krish, a reporter. She's determined to understand this attack on Jaideep, and her search leads her to.
Wait, so we have this reporter, Maria, trying to get to the bottom of things, like a detective almost.
Sort of, yeah. And her investigation leads her to Giraj Makwana, a Dalit PhD student living in Australia. Now, his personal stories, they really provide a stark look at how deep caste discrimination runs in India.
So we're going back and forth between India and Australia, past and present. That's got to be a powerful way to connect the dots.
Yeah, it really highlights the long-lasting impact of these issues. I mean, Giraj talks about being denied access to wells, being ostracized, even facing threats, all because of his caste. Just basic human rights denied because of something he can't control.
It's hard to believe that stuff still happens. You'd think that moving to a new country like Australia would offer some escape from that.
Well, that's what the film challenges, that idea of a clean break. It reveals how caste discrimination can travel with the Indian diaspora. The chapter even brings in this other source. Hold on, let me see. The interface of India-Australia, one shared language, one shared meaning. And it says that even Indian students in Australia express views reflecting the caste system sometimes.
Wow, so even thousands of miles away, this deep-rooted prejudice is still influencing how people see each other.
Yeah, it's almost like this invisible hierarchy that follows them, shaping social interactions even in a totally new environment.
That ties into what the film explores about hypocrisy, right?
Yeah.
Especially within the Indian diaspora.
Exactly. You see these Indian migrants demanding equality in their new home, Australia, while sometimes they turn a blind eye to, or even participate in, discrimination within their own community.
So it's like, do as I say, not as I do.
Right. And there's this one scene the chapter points out. Maria's own father asks about Jiraj's caste. It's like this stark reminder even those who've experienced prejudice can hold on to biases.
Man, that's a heavy scene. It makes you think, just because someone has experienced one form of prejudice doesn't mean they're immune to holding on to others. It's complicated, right?
Humans are complicated, and that's what the film does so well. It captures this nuanced reality, how anyone can be complicit in perpetuating discrimination.
And what about these Indian students in Australia? The chapter calls them cash cows for the universities, but they still face racism and violence.
It's this weird contradiction, right? They're valued for their economic contribution, but still marginalized because of their race or culture.
Like, society can't decide whether to embrace them for their money or push them away for who they are.
Exactly. And the film doesn't let anyone off the hook. The chapter explains how it criticizes how the media and politicians use both caste-based violence in India and racism in Australia for their own gain.
It's like they're exploiting these real issues for their own agendas instead of actually trying to solve them.
Right. It raises questions about who has the power to shape the narrative and whose voices get silenced in the process. But there's one character, Jaydeep, the student attacked on the metro, who offers a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, the chapter mentions how he goes through this huge transformation after learning about Giri and the Dalit community. He starts to see the injustices his own community has committed.
It hints at the potential for change. Like recognizing those injustices is the first step towards doing something about them.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Well, it's not a fairy tale ending. The film acknowledges how deep these problems are. But Jaydeep's journey, it suggests that change is possible. It starts with individuals.
It's like one person's transformation might not change the whole world, but it's got to start somewhere, right?
And that's where we leave things for now. We've covered a lot, but there's still so much more to discuss.
Definitely. We'll be back soon to dive even deeper into the film's message and what it means for all of us. Thinking more about this film, it strikes me how it doesn't try to offer a simple solution. It's not about blaming one group or giving easy answers. It's more about making us really look inward.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something there. The film's power is how it acts as a mirror.
Yeah.
It reflects back on society and makes us confront our own biases and prejudices, even the ones we might not be aware of.
Mirrors, huh? That reminds me, the chapter talked about how the film uses visuals like contrasting images, scenes of wealth right next to scenes of poverty. It really highlights those disparities that can lead to prejudice.
Oh, absolutely. That contrast visually reinforces those systemic inequalities that often underpin discrimination. It shows that it's not just individual attitudes, but the very structures of society that create and maintain these power imbalances.
Right. It's like a visual representation of how privilege and disadvantage are connected, and how sometimes those with power don't even see the struggles of those they're marginalizing. And it goes beyond just money, right?
Right. It's more than that. The chapter also talks about the use of color in the film, specifically how the title, The Color of Darkness, suggests that darkness itself isn't just one thing. It has different shades, representing the different ways people experience discrimination.
Oh, I see. It's like saying, hey, look closer. There's more to this than meets the eye.
Exactly. It's a much more nuanced take, right?
Mm.
That layered approach adds depth and complexity to the film's message. It pushes the viewer to move beyond simple definitions of prejudice and grapple with its many faces.
It definitely makes you think. And how about the portrayal of the Dalit community itself? I read that the film avoids romanticizing their struggles and presents them as complex individuals with agency. They're not victims, they're actively resisting oppression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be so easy to fall into that trap, right?
Mhm.
Portraying a marginalized group as one homogenous block or as helpless. But the film recognizes the Dalit community has its own internal dynamics, its own perspectives. They have their own ways of navigating a world that often tries to silence them.
And by showing their resilience and their fight for justice, it challenges those stereotypes. It makes their experiences more relatable,
Yeah.
more human.
Right. It's a reminder that those facing marginalization aren't just sitting back. They're shaping their own narratives, fighting for change, and challenging the very systems that try to define them.
Okay, so we've talked about the visuals, but what about the sound? The chapter mentioned how the film uses silence in a really deliberate way. Like the dialogue stops suddenly and it makes you confront what you've just seen or heard.
Oh yeah, those moments of silence are so powerful. It gives you space to reflect. You let the emotions sink in, and you're forced to wrestle with those uncomfortable truths. It's almost like the silence is making a statement itself.
It's a bit unsettling, but I think that's the point. It makes you, the viewer, a part of the experience. You can't just passively watch. You're right there with the characters, feeling the weight of these issues.
Exactly. And it disrupts how you normally watch a film, right? It creates a sense of unease that reflects how many people feel when they have to confront these topics. And then there's the music.
Oh yeah, the music. The chapter talks about how traditional Indian music is used, especially during scenes showing Dalit culture. It felt like such a beautiful touch.
Yeah, and it probably serves a few purposes, right? It celebrates the richness of their heritage, highlights the beauty of their culture, which is often overlooked, and then There's the contrast with the more modern Western music in other parts of the film.
So it's not just about the music itself, but what it represents, right?
Mhm.
That contrast highlights the clash between cultures, the struggles people face trying to hold on to their traditions while also trying to fit into a new culture. It's a tough balancing act.
Definitely. It speaks to how complicated identity can be. How do you maintain a sense of belonging? Do you hold on to your roots or adapt to this new environment? The film captures that struggle perfectly.
Talking about all this makes me realize that The Color of Darkness isn't just about pointing out discrimination, it's a call to action.
You got it. It's a challenge to examine our own biases, confront injustice, and work towards a more equitable world.
Right. It's not about feeling bad for people. It's about taking those feelings and turning them into something positive, something that creates change.
Right.
And that's the real power of storytelling.
Absolutely. And as we move to the final part of this deep dive, let's keep that in mind. The film isn't just about understanding the problem, it's about empowering us to be part of the solution.
One thing that stuck with me from the chapter is how J-Deep's change, it's not presented as the answer to discrimination. It recognizes these issues, they run deep, right?
Yeah.
Systemic, not like one person changing their mind fixes everything.
Yeah, it would be super naive to think that, wouldn't it? Like, individual change is enough to wipe away centuries of prejudice. But J.Deep's story, it does offer some hope. That willingness to learn, to challenge his own ideas, suggests that maybe personal change can be like a spark for something bigger.
Right, a spark. And it's not even just about him, recognizing the injustice the elite community faces. The chapter highlights it's about him seeing his own part in it. Even if he wasn't doing it on purpose, it's like that self-awareness, that's the key.
It really is. That's where the real work starts, I think. Not just saying, oh yeah, prejudice exists. It's about understanding how we might be adding to it, even in little ways, without realizing it. And then doing something about it, changing those biases within ourselves.
It makes you think, how often do we just stick with people who think like us? It's easy to stay in that bubble, right?
Too easy. But when we step outside of that, when we hear different viewpoints, especially the ones that challenge us, that's where real growth happens. It's like seeing the world through someone else's eyes,
Yeah.
building empathy, understanding that everyone's experience is different.
And not everyone likes that, right? The chapter mentioned how the film was received both in India and abroad. Lots of debate, some controversy too. Some critics in India, they accused The Color of Darkness of exaggerating the caste issue or showing India in a bad light.
It's understandable in a
Yeah.
way, right? When art tackles sensitive stuff that's so deeply woven into a culture, it's bound to push buttons. Some people get defensive, they don't want to hear it.
It's like that mirror again, right? Reflecting back something we don't want to see.
Exactly. And confronting prejudice, whether it's our own or society's, it's not easy. It can be uncomfortable, even painful.
Yeah.
But if we really want to create a world with more understanding, more equality, we have to do the work.
So the film, it's not shying away from that. It's like, let's have this conversation, even if it's tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shines a light on these complex issues and says, okay, now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
It encourages us to move past simple solutions and do the hard work of dismantling prejudice.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I feel kind of hopeful seeing how JD changed, but also a sense of responsibility.
I get that. The film shows how widespread discrimination is, but it also reminds us that stories, they can create change. They can challenge us and make us want to be better people.
And that's a powerful takeaway, right? We all have a part to play in making the world a fairer, more just place. And it starts with us looking at ourselves, checking our biases, listening to voices that are different from our own, and having these tough conversations.
Well said. So, to everyone listening, we encourage you, go check out The Color of Darkness. Keep thinking about these themes. Remember, creating a more just world, it's a journey, not a destination. It takes constant effort, empathy, and that willingness to learn and grow.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you've got lots to think about. Until next time.